but we weren't there. He was. That means he trumps us all, basically. This is Vincent Speranza. Good evening, Vincent.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and I'm delighted that you've taken time out to join us tonight.
Not at all.
Thank you. Now, can you tell us a little bit what it was like when you first arrived here in Bastogne?
Wow. First you need the background that the 101st Airborne Division had come from the market garden operation badly mauled, under strength, under-equipped, ammunition was low, food was low, and a lot of the weapons had been turned into salvage. And so the division was sent to a camp in France, Montmelon, and it was to be refurbished. They were to get replacements and food, equipment, and a lot of the weapons were to be repaired. Unfortunately, 3 weeks later, the emergency took place, and the 101st Airborne Division was sent to Bastogne. When the sergeant came in that morning and put the lights on in the barracks, it was December the 17th, and we were all fast asleep from a little partying the night before. But what the sergeant said was, all right, get up, get out, we're going to move up to the front. And we all said, you're crazy, the ground is frozen, we'll all break our legs. And he said, you're not jumping, you're going to go up in trucks. And so all I could think of was, after all this training, to jump, I'm going to go into combat in a truck. And so it happened. They put us all jammed into trucks to get us up to Bastogne because 25 German divisions, saved up by Hitler and his boys, and 9 of those divisions were Panzers with the latest German tanks, Mark IVs and Tiger Royals, and they were all heading for Antwerp, which was the American port of entry at that time, and Antwerp had all the gasoline, food supplies and so on that the Americans needed and that the Germans were going to catch it. Unfortunately for them, as they had to funnel through the Ardennes, there was a little town in the way called Bastogne. And Bastogne was a transportation hub. It had 5 roads and 2 railroads, and it was a picturesque little town. You should have seen a picture of it after we left. The Germans were on their way. They had smashed through 4 American infantry outfits, the 4th, the 28th, the 106th, and the 9th Armored Division. And they had just destroyed those men. The 4 divisions were ruined as a fighting unit, and they were ordered to the rear. Later on, we found out that the number was 10% of our boys going into Bastogne were unarmed. I was a machine gunner without a machine gun. I had a trench knife in my boot to fight the Battle of Bastogne with. But what saved us was these men that were being sent to the rear. They were in a daze, and most of them made no objection when we just told them that they were going back and they didn't need the rifle, so we took it right off his shoulder, went into his pockets and took hand grenades, and I found a man with a nice light .30 machine gun and 2 belts of ammunition, and I told him I thought it was too heavy for him to carry, so that I would relieve him of his burden. So I did get armed before I actually got into the battle. We were there one day. By the way, I don't know how much of this you want. You want to?
Oh, Vincent, dear me, I would not have the bad manners to interrupt you, my friend.
Well,
you were here.
I have a shortened version, or
you've got a short version and a long version.
You
got time to go for a pint after this, by the way. Yeah. Oh, great.
Well, I'll recover. Believe me.
Woodman.
The Germans hit on the 19th. We were there just one day before they got there, and gave us just enough time to dig in and set up a perimeter. And folks, that perimeter did not yield 1 inch. When the Germans had hit with their 25 divisions and decided that they couldn't get in, they left 8 divisions to take Bastogne, and the rest of them went north and south, trying to get to Antwerp by another route. Those 25 divisions, the 8 divisions that were left there, made one broad frontal attack. They were cocky as heck. They had smashed through those other 4 divisions, and they thought that they were going to do the same thing here. They didn't know it was the 101st Airborne in those
There you go.
foxholes. And personally, I was a private soldier, and we were dug in near Mont, a little village right outside of Bastogne. And the morning of the first attack, the Germans made an attack across an open field. They were very confident, and the first attack, as soon as the fog lifted in the morning, we were treated to a noise party. Everything. The 120 millimeter guns were going off. The tanks were firing point blank with their 88s right at the foxholes. And by the way, when they hit one, the man disappeared. The infantry opened up with their rifles and machine guns, and all hell had broken loose. And it was just about daylight after the fog lifted. This was my first combat. I had a Light 30 with 2 belts of ammunition, and I was to be tested that morning. The tanks had come all the way up on both flanks, and what the Germans didn't know and what we didn't know either, about halfway across that field, buried in feet of snow, were barbed wire fences that the farmers had put up. The rows of them, not just one single fence. Rows of barbed wire fences as pens, but hidden by the snow, the German first wave of infantry stumbled onto the fences and got hung up. And we are dying as targets, and the lieutenant kept saying, no, not yet, not yet, not yet. The second wave comes up, they're trying to help their buddies get off the fences, and a few of them had gotten through and were shooting at us, but not very many. They were hung up by those fences. And the artillery, of course, and the tanks kept a steady barrage. And the lieutenant continued to say, not yet, not yet. When the third wave came up, now you had knots of men struggling to get by and through fences and around, and the tanks were almost on us. And the lieutenant said, now. And everything we had opened up. A lot of people don't know that in addition to the 101st Airborne, there were elements of the 705 tank destroyers, and the 10th Armored Division had some tanks, and this is what made the difference in the battle. All the paratroopers had was rifles and machine guns, but McAuliffe's artillery and the 705 tank destroyers, we must give credit to for helping to break up that first attack. When the knots of men, it's not nice to say, but machine gunner's delight, we opened up, and when we did, it was a slaughter. The snow turned red, and the air body laying all over the field, and the more they struggled, the more our fire became more and more effective, and they had completely been stopped. The tanks had to turn around and go back, because when there isn't an infantry backup to the tanks become vulnerable. Our destroyers in the section that I was at had destroyed 3 of the tanks on the left flank, and the others turned around and went back. And they never tried a frontal attack like that again. They thought that they were going to breeze through, but the 101st Airborne did not give it down. The line that was set up that day was never breached. Not one German soldier ever got past that defense line for the rest of the entire battle.
But you know, excuse me for interrupting, Mr. Speranza, 70 years after the fact, you come back to Bastogne quite frequently. How many times have you been back?
5?
5 times. And I just wondered briefly, what goes through your head when you come back here? What do you think about when you come back here?
I'll describe it. My daughter was with me, and it was 2009. Let me back up one more time. When I came home from the war, I just literally looked at myself in the mirror and said, listen, there was a job to do out there. We did it. It's over. I want nothing to do with anything military now. We were not professional soldiers. We were civilians trained to do a job.
Yeah.
And when we came back, all we wanted to do was a completely new life. We took all the scenes and then put them back of the head, locked the door, and now we proceeded with a normal life. Found a nice woman, got married, had kids, and became a school teacher, and lived a normal American life for 65 years.
Yeah.
Accidentally, I'm meeting a woman who had a heavy accent, and when I asked her, Madame, do you have, do I know the French accent? And she said, no, Belgique. And I said, oh, Belgian. She said, yes, why, do you know Belgium? And I said, yeah, bombs, bullets, and snow. That's what I know about Belgium. And she said, you were here during the war? I said, yes. And she said, you have never been back? And I said, no. And she said, you must go back. The people of Bastogne have never forgotten the 101st Airborne Division. She said, there are monuments to you all through the town. They celebrate every year. They reenact the battle. And she said, if you go back to Bastogne and you wear a little pin that says 101st Airborne Division, you don't buy a drink or a meal the whole time you're there. I said, sounds good to me.
Fantastic.
I had my doubts, so really I did not want to resurrect those ideas, those thoughts, and those things that happened, but I did go, and my whole life has been changed since then.
Really?
When I met with these people, and they showed me the kind of sincerity and
Yeah.
I cannot describe how I felt that these people were still saying nice things to me about something I did 70 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
But they...
Will you help us remember? Okay.
Well, they also changed my life to the point where... I know you want me to tell a beer story.
Yeah.
I will.
This is a prompt. This is a prompt coming on here, Vince. Yeah.
But what happened was my daughter and I met a fellow named Marco Killian and Johnny Bona, and Marco actually said that he knew where my foxhole was, and I could not believe it. But he took me out to Mont, where we were dug in, and he showed me where each company was dug in on both sides of the road, and then he said, and that's your foxhole?
Wow.
And I said, Marco,
That's close.
how do you know that's my foxhole? And he says, your company commander, Captain Stanley, when he turned in his after-action reports, he put a diagram where he had the map. And you were the only machine gun in the 3rd platoon, right? Yeah. He said, look, MG, machine gun there. Has to be. Right?
Doesn't get better than that, does it?
For the first time now in 65 years, everything came back. The snow-covered field, the artillery, the noise, the banging, and I got emotional, let's put it that way, and my daughter pulled me aside and said, Marco, my father's seen enough, let's go back. And on the way back to the hotel, I asked them to go to lunch. And they said yes, and at lunch I ordered 3 bottles of wine. I wanted to change the mood. I said I don't want to feel differently, and put 2 soldiers together and 3 bottles of wine, and we started to get a little noisy and loud, and the people were all looking at me, embarrassed my daughter, but we started telling stories.
Oh.
And Johnny told us about Belgian tanks, and Marco told us about fighting in Bosnia and Kosovo, and when it came my turn, I told them this story. I said, you know, about the 2nd day of the battle, the Germans slipped around and completely surrounded us. They captured the field hospital and all of the medical personnel except for one doctor and a medical officer. They had captured all the beds, the cots, the blankets, the medications, the medicines, and so on. And we had no place to put the wounded. And the only buildings that still had walls standing reasonably well were the church and the seminary across the street.
Oh, the seminary, yeah.
And the wounded were just put on the floor of the church. And then we went to the houses and pulled all the blankets and drapes and curtains, whatever we could find to cover them up with. The people that were not wounded yet were donated one of their blankets to the so-and-so, but it was a pretty pitiful situation.
Oh.
The doctors had to operate by candlelight, and they had 2 big lamps and running out of morphine and so on. It was
Bad situation.
not nice. My friend had gotten hit in both legs, named Joe Lewis, and my sergeant sent me back to get batteries for the radios, and while I was back there, I went to look for my friend. And when I got into the church there and stepped in among these guys all laying on the floor, I found him and I said, Joe, how you doing? And he said, nothing. I got a couple of pieces in his leg. I'll be out of here tomorrow. I said, well, that's great, Joe. I said, come on out, I need you. And Joe, I gotta go back. Is there anything I can do for you before I leave? He said, yeah, go find me something to drink.
Right.
I said, Joe, where am I going to find you something to drink? We're surrounded and cut off. There are no supplies coming in here. He said, go look in the taverns. I said, Joe, the taverns are all bought. Go look in the taverns, you might get lucky. The first tavern I went, I come out of the church, went right down the street there, and the first tavern I went into, all broken glass and nothing. I stepped out of that one, went down a little further, and the next tavern that I stepped into was pretty beat up, but when I went to the bar and pulled the handle, the beer handle, beer came out. And I said, ooh. I looked around for a container, and I couldn't find anything, so I took off my helmet.
Yeah.
And, the same helmet you use in a foxhole for an emergency. I switched it with snow in there, and I filled it up with beer and went running back to the church. And I said, Joe, I got some beer. And he sat up and I started pouring beer down and give me some of that. And I moved over and said, give me some of that. And there was around feeding all these guys.
That's why we have this.
I ran out.
Absolutely.
And so Joe says, go get some more. Joe, go get some more. I went down, filled up my helmet, spilled half of it on the way. You know, it's snowing like it was freezing weather. The snow was like hitting, ice. It was hitting you, freezing. I was slipping. I spilled half of the beer. But when I got back to the church, standing in the doorway is the regimental surgeon, a major.
Really?
I'm a PFC, by the way. Yeah. He said, what are you doing, soda? I said, sir, they're giving aid and comfort to the wounded. And he said, you stupid jackass, don't you know that I've got chest cases and stomach cases in there? You give them B, you will kill. Get out of here before I have you shot. I said, yes, sir. And he said, I put that helmet on. But I ran like hell back to the foxhole before he changed his mind. And at the time, hey, that was a little incident that happened during the war. Forget about it.
Wonderful stuff.
No.
Wonderful.
That's a little more. 65 years later, when I went back, and Johnny and them were telling stories. I told you about the story. While I'm telling this beer story, Marco and Johnny are moving back and they're saying, you were the GI that brought beer and the helmet to the woman? I said, yeah.
Wow.
I said, you went to the church?
You did it.
I said, yeah. They said, wait a bring us 4 bottles of Airborne beer.
Yeah.
And so the waiter comes back, and he has 4 bottles of beer, Airborne beer.
This is Airborne
Yeah,
beer.
and 4 little ceramic bowls in the shape of a GI helmet that they served it in.
Which is now it's part of history.
More important,
Yeah, it's part of history now. So.
on the label of the bottle of beer, it shows you a paratrooper with a helmet full of beer.
And that was you.
Of course,
You were.
but nobody believed that was a true story. They thought it was just a phony rumor.
Really? That's fantastic. Fantastic.
And everybody was flabbergasted.
Oh,
and
A good beer story.
since that time, this story has been on the internet. Has like 930,000 hits on it. The world all seems to be amused by a GI giving his buddies beer in a helmet.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mr. Speranza.
The book called
Thank
Nuts.
you.
I don't know if you wanted to.
Right, okay.